Welcome, Bitcoiners, to one of the funniest days you'll ever encounter in life, I think. Let me make sure everything's set up here. We're good. We're good. Pardon me for being a little late. You guys in America had a time change. I did not. So, adjusting my wake up time and getting the show ready, I had another hour before. So, pardon me for being a few minutes late today. It was actually the coffee that was not factored in. But it doesn't matter because the sun is up and Bitcoin is running. Everything's going great. So I need the coffee, right? It goes well with a sun up and a running Bitcoin. So let's have some coffee and talk about the other stuff. Mm. So, and I had a lot of trouble finding Clown World stuff today because the whole world has kind of merged. Like the Clown World is the news today, the fake news is the news. So it was a little tough, but there's enough Clown World stuff going on within the show today, within the show. So to start, I want to pay attention to a article from the Washington Post. The Washington Post. And this is what they say. There's a lot going on, but they wrote a story. Helene Olin wrote it. And she says, "Hi, everyone." Typical Washington Post. "Hi, everyone. I know it's a busy news day, but I wrote about something that's driving all of us insane." And she's right, so I don't want to make fun of her too much, right? She says, why it's so hard to custom. Well, she didn't even write her tweet correctly. So I'm reading it literally here, but this is actually the Washington Post writer's tweet. She actually wrote this and tweeted it out. Why it's so hard to customer support on the phone. I think what she meant was why it's so hard to get or find customer support on the phone. Hint, she says, it's about money and not your money. It's about money and not your money. Have you guys noticed that? You can't do anything with there's no customer support. Have any of you tried to buy stuff at like a normal store lately? My wife, I mentioned this story on the show a little while ago. She didn't really see it. And in November or something, she needed a new iPhone. And I laughed. I said, "You're going to go buy a new phone?" She's like, "Yeah, what do you mean?" I was like, "I'm going to buy a new phone." I said, "Well, I'll see you maybe by the end of the day. We'll see if you actually get a new phone and if I see you by the end of the day." So I shared the story at the time for all the newcomers we have here. So she went, right, and she didn't know what she was getting into, right? She didn't really know what I had seen and what I had been tracking and what I had been following. And she came back at the end of the day. She left in the morning, came back at the end of the day, no phone. And she's like, "How did you know? How were you right about this?" I said, "Well, you can't actually buy stuff in stores anymore. Like they don't know how to do it. They always just got a new payment system or it's new staff or whatever, right? It doesn't matter." And she went to multiple carriers, and they send her from there. They went, "Well, don't go to Walmart. It's not going to work." They sent her from Walmart to T-Mobile, and then T-Mobile sent her somewhere else, another T-Mobile, and there's no phone at the end. She still does. She's still on the old phone. She hasn't got a new phone. There's no new phones. What are you talking about? They make them. The manufacturing of new phones is fine, but the customer service part, it ain't happening. And you see all these videos now. Now I know the amount of videos we're being subjected to of people fighting and algorithmically surfacing all of this stuff. I get it. But just look at what's going on in many of these big box stores in America. Just complete chaos, right? And there really isn't in store or online much customer support anywhere anymore. So, what's going on here? Why do we have such trouble with customer support? Well, I kept the board the same today just because I thought it really continues to reflect the world we're in and what we're experiencing right now, and again, the psychological engines that are the economy. Again, I don't think of economy in terms of numbers and math and, oh, what's the stock, and if there's this much debt for a country, and if there's this much that. What's happened is we've entered a world of confusopoly. The ability to just deal with the world for most people has become too complicated, right? We see all of these personal finance failure stories, the amount of credit card debt, the amount of hours people are working, even this idea that employment is up. I've seen many indications that it's just people getting a second, a third job just to make ends meet because of how complicated things have become, how difficult it is just to have a normal life. You need at this point to have a normal life. I've seen some of the conversions, like your normal 90s life, right? You have a house, some vacation time a year, you take a big elaborate family vacation, the typical American experience in the 90s. I've seen it estimated that it requires about $500,000 of income to live in a city, to live in the right part of town, to have this, the double two cars, the this and that. Now, I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but what I see is that just life has become so complicated because if you follow the money, as she says, right? Hint, it's about money and not your money. What we have here is a situation where most human brains simply cannot navigate the world that has been created. This is what entropy of a system ends up looking like. There is no right answer half the time. There is no clear path half the time for many people, right? Of course, Bitcoiners are the contrast here, and we've seen this stuff coming and we predicted a lot of these things. So the adjustment to the curveballs being thrown by the modern world, not as much arc on them, right? Not as much arc. But you can't really just go out and do the things that you would expect. Now, I've been to other countries recently where the psyops aren't as bad and where people aren't as demoralized. And I'm in a foreign country right now. Customer service here is, here's the thing too about America: the fall from grace is high, right? America had better customer service. It was known for customer service. The only places I've been in my life that have better customer service than America are Japan and Korea. And that's a cultural thing, I think, and they're just so good at it, right? They're just so thoughtful, and they don't even get tips, which is always what surprised me. When I lived in Europe, I always believed it was American tip culture that maintained the high level of customer service because it's a good job. I was slinging plates for years, working in bars, working in service industry, and always made good money as a teenager. I mean, you're always walking away with a handful of cash and usually um, good experiences and learning how to navigate, bad customers and needy customers, and still doing it in a way that really cultivates excellent professional skills. I think I've always said that the best learning experience I ever had of any job was in the service industry, just because it does teach you how to order things in your mind, how to remember things, how to prioritize on the fly, how to adjust to all kinds of craziness and reprioritize when something happens. You hear a big crash, you got to reprioritize in the service industry. And these are really good lessons for anyone in the human resources world. And I think was one of the great things about America. It's what Europeans always loved when they came to the continent, right? It was the customer service. It was the service with a smile. It was the sincere, that's what always surprised people who would come to North America, was that it's not, they had a perception that the service was phony until they actually experienced it and then saw that, for one instant, that server, that customer service rep really did care about your needs. I really was prioritizing them and thinking about them and trying to satisfy them. It wasn't completely around the country, but it was a common feeling, right? And now we find that one of those great hallmarks of American society is just garbage. It's trash, right? You go into any one of these stores, you're going to be treated rudely. And this is something that really did happen after COVID. And I know and I've regularly blamed myself for example, inflation in food. I was happy to pay more people for food. But another thing is the coffees, right? When the coffee people started coming to work in New York City in April 2020, I was throwing cash at them because I was worried they wouldn't come back the next day. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to get one of these nice coffees and that I love, right? So I would pay extra tips to them. I continue to do that, right? I continue to acknowledge the effort and work that good customer service people put into it, and will always try to reciprocate, right? Reciprocation is one of the big tricks in this world, right? Reciprocation and doing something for others, which immediately, for me anyway, if someone does something for me, I feel instantly indebted to them, right? That's just the way I think most people operate. That reciprocation is a powerful persuasion tool. It's a powerful social bond that I think was at the foundation of the American experience for many, many years, this reciprocal idea, I'll do this and I'll do you this favor. And then you don't even have to say it, right? People just know I owe you, right? I owe you. So it's something that I always have tried to do, and something that I've oriented myself towards. So what we see now, though, is that psychologically, everything that happened after COVID means there's not much reciprocation there. The masks really were the first domino to fall here, right? And you could see it because we weren't able to communicate facial expressions just at let's say, a teller at a supermarket, right? The tellers at the supermarket now are some of the meanest, most angry people you're going to find. It's crazy because think about it. Everyone comes in and, when the masks were there, they were complaining about not having stuff. And now they're still complaining about not having stuff. The customers, I mean. And, if you don't have a mask and you say, well, where's this? It all sounds rude. You could even be smiling a little bit, do you have any stuff? Right. And they go, no. Right. But when you have the mask, you don't see it. Right. It's, do you have any stuff? And then you don't really see the subtle facial expression. So I think the loss of the subtle facial expressions and all of those things, and just being able to, with these small facial expressions, understand what the intentions of the person are, were thrown off. All of that was thrown off. And now it's just a big mess of anxiety and trouble and all that stuff. So we can see immediately that just on our regular economy, our everyday economy, the psychological engine that keeps it going is broken. Right? We don't have American customer service anymore. We don't have all the things that we got used to and all the things that made us spend more money. Right? It was always the American customer service that separated you from your money so quickly because it was easy. Right? Many servers would say, oh, that guy's going to leave. I got to get him the bill, right? He wants to leave right away. And that's what I would do as a server as well, right? If I'd see any indication someone wants to get going, you got to get there quick and get them the thing, and you'll get a better tip if you don't screw up that part and all of those things. So that seems to be just gone, right? But it's not just the customer service. Here's another quote from, or another observation from Mark Andreessen. And this has to do with an article in the New York Times today called "Plans to Build Air Train to LaGuardia Are Officially Scrapped. Ballooning costs help doom what had been a pet project of former Governor Andrew Cuomo." Now, as someone who lived in New York City for years and recently visited LaGuardia Airport, I was blown away, right? Because I'd used LaGuardia Airport regularly. LaGuardia Airport treats Montreal or Toronto or Burlington, Vermont, where I'll usually fly into New York from, as local airports because we can do immigration in Canada. So we just would fly into LaGuardia, which is a regional. If you're not from New York or America, if you don't know, there's 3 big airports in New York City, but LaGuardia is a regional airport. So it's not for international flights in general. It's for moving around the East Coast of North America. I think there are some West Coast flights, but in general, it's a smaller radius of flights coming in there. And so that airport was the shittiest airport in the modern world before. I mean, you felt like, because it's one of the earliest airports that was ever built, which is normal, right? America built airports first, and LaGuardia in New York City was one of the oldest, named after a mayor of New York from the 1930s. So it was an old airport, and it really felt that way. It was a shithole. It was terrible. It was ugly. It was claustrophobic. It was unorganized. It was dirty. It was chaotic. You got no impression that you were entering the civilized world when you went into that airport. You believed clearly it was the first thing you thought of was I'm arriving in a third world country, right? I'm arriving in a shithole. And, of course, New York is not that, but that's what the airport did. So they rebuilt the whole thing. And I was pleasantly surprised when I arrived last October in New York City to find LaGuardia the greatest airport in America at this point, right? Just amazing, right? Nothing like Singapore, nothing like some of the great airports globally, but nevertheless, an awesome airport. And so this piece of infrastructure was important because it would clear up a lot of the crazy traffic that comes around LaGuardia, because it's not that easy to get into LaGuardia from the highway, and it's a bit confusing. It's not attached to any infrastructure as normal airports are, right? You have to take a taxi. There's no real other way out, or someone picks you up. There really isn't a way to get out of the airport and get to the city other than using these pieces of infrastructure. So the train was a big deal, right? It was a big deal for America. It was a big deal for New York City to finally have a legitimate rail link from an airport to a center of the city. So it didn't happen. And the funniest thing is, do you know why it didn't happen? Here's what Alex Stapp says. He says, another major infrastructure project is abandoned after ballooning costs. But it's not just the ballooning costs. Here's what happens. It's legal challenges, right? The groups suing to block the project claim that environmental review must have been incomplete because they did it too quickly. They did the environmental review in 2 years, not 4. So they're being sued to say that, well, it's not complete. You didn't do it right? You didn't get it done. So right away we can see that the right away we can see that the capacity for America to build things is also in jeopardy. Right? We can't do it. We can't give customer service. We can't build new stuff. And Mark Andreessen put it perfectly. He says, this is why I say building new infrastructure is now illegal. It doesn't matter how much money we pour into things, they simply will not come to be. And it's the same with the train in California. It's the same with so many projects around America. We hope and pray not the nuclear projects. We've seen a few go live. But the rest of it is garbage, right? It's not happening. So again, we enter the world of inertia caused by a type of mental degradation and psychological degradation that comes from the psyops that are being inflicted, the financial troubles that are being perpetuated, the inability to even have reference to money anymore is what's causing this. And it doesn't look like it's stopping, right? It doesn't look like it's stopping because everything we saw yesterday, everything we saw with the banks seem like they're setting us up for more of this trouble, and I'll explain. So if you think about what happened in the past couple of days, right, a lot of people saying this is a deliberate, controlled demolition of the crypto banking rails that connect crypto to the system, and the banks that were targeted, Signature also being Trump's bank, by the way, now in New York state receivership. I wonder what's going to come of that, right? I wonder what political stuff is going to come from that. Remember, everyone was already wondering about loans that Trump was given years ago from Signature, and they were from Russia, collusion, right? Mueller said it was all that stuff back then. So there's that, Silicon Valley, Silvergate, all the ones that had the crypto relationships, as Nick Carter predicted weeks ago with his Choke Point 2.0 article that he wrote for Pirate Wires, Mike Solana's media outfit. Mike Solana, a speaker, not announced yet, at Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th. So he's another one of these independent journalists that I've sort of targeted and believe are really important to get at the event. So Nick Carter predicted this choke point 2.0. And now if you listen to what Mr. Frank said, who was on the board of Signature, part of the Dodd-Frank bank systemic fix from years ago, was on the board, he says Signature didn't even have trouble and that it was politically put into receivership. For what reasons? The crypto part is a big part of it. I know that at Kraken, we actually poached to our strategy team one of the people who helped build this at Signature. So he had intimate knowledge of how this settlement system worked and how it created these rails between crypto, Bitcoin, and the fiat world, which were much faster for settlement, much faster for exchange and liquidity between the two environments. So it was a big deal. And so their infrastructure is now shut down. The company's in receivership. I bet you're going to get some of these Trump had a loan and Russia, blah, 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 coming out of it. We'll see this whole stuff get charged up again, right? The whole broadcast nature of the propaganda should get some ammo with this takeover. But here's what we saw happen over the last few days, because it was regional banks that ended up getting caught in the contagion and the rumors around runs on small banks, right? Because almost all of them have the same exposure to the bonds that were bought a few years ago, and now the interest rate risk that has come with the quick hike in interest rates. So what Radar hits, this is, Bitcoin Archives has his own mainstream media news ticker on Twitter, and it's called Radar Hits. And here's what he says: Breaking. Banking giants JP Morgan, Citi, and others have been flooded with new deposits in the largest movement of funds in more than a decade. Rest in peace, small banks. The whole system is more concentrated and fragile than ever. You had the Citadel CTO Ken Griffin say US capitalism is breaking down before our eyes with the consolidation of these banks. You had Joe Colangelo, who was an old Bitcoiner from back in the day. He wrote Consumer Reports. He's now in the rail business, but he still pays attention. I still follow him. He's an interesting guy. Here he says, further evidence that if the government had simply done nothing, and they're talking about Silicon Valley Bank having found a buyer already by Friday, but in the same way that Signature was put into receivership, according to Mr. Frank, they didn't have any financial trouble. It was just done as a politically motivated event. What he says is that this was a targeted destruction of the bank. So it sounds like war is being declared on the industry that we work in, or at least the adjacent industry, crypto, Bitcoin. I still see distinctions, but we can't say that the whole world sees the distinctions. So in the case where we're being lumped in the same boat, lumped in the same pile by these folks, you could just kind of have to accept that we're together in this for whatever reason, right? Not amongst ourselves, but other perceptions of us. So Cernovich has probably the most important take on all of this stuff with bank consolidation and everything that's going on. And what he says is, y'all think cancel culture is bad now. Wait until all banking is consolidated into 2 to 3 New York banks because smaller regional banks and credit unions are allowed to fail. Have you thought this through at all? Or are you still stuck in the 2008 talking points? And that is one of the big worries here, right? And he says it again. He says, too big to fail banks are the most likely to ban conservatives from banking. And I don't think it's just conservatives. It's going to be Bitcoiners, anyone who has the capacity to criticize the regime, criticize what's going on, would seem like a target, right? So he says, too big to fail banks are the most likely to ban folks. I'll alter his tweet a little bit. He says conservatives. I think it's bigger from banking. They will not ever be allowed to fail. He says. How does it make sense to let smaller credit unions or regional banks go under? Think this one through and show your work. So that is probably the best take on conclusions here, is that just as we have discussed and pushed things back in time to 1964 many times on this show, when LBJ took over, when the original people protesting and wondering about JFK being assassinated and what's going on with all of that, that's where the Bank Secrecy Act came from. That's where following the money to understand where protest first started. That's where this whole edifice was planted in the ground, and financial surveillance became the most important feature of political relationships between the propagandists and normal people who wanted to protest. And that's where the blanket started to cover America. That's where the New York Times started to project conspiracy theorists into the mainstream vocabulary, right? They'd never said the words conspiracy theorist before 1964. From 1964 on, it becomes a major feature, a kill shot, a rhetorical kill shot to people who would criticize what's going on. And that's why follow the money back then became so important, because that's why follow the money became so important, because it was, and follow the money became important, but follow the information that goes along with the money. That's where SWIFT comes from, right? SWIFT is a messaging service that goes alongside the bank wires in order for folks to have information for information's sake. What can it tell you about these people? And that has been weaponized, and has been weaponized for a long time now. Operation Choke Point was another example of it, and that was when international banks and American banks focused on the political activities of folks and started to take away their banking relationships in order to defund opposition. And we're seeing it here again, right? Mike Cernovich, and I think most people see that now. I think it's not really um, um, it's not really a hidden storyline, but it's important, right? It's important. But remember, we live in a world here where the psychological disharmony, the schizophrenia caused by the breakdown of all of these institutions of the follow the money track means that none of this stuff is going to get done. And this is a great quote, I think, for summarizing what's going on, right? And it's why I titled the show today what I titled it. This is from Joey from Philly, right? He says, the banking system is secure. The border is secure. Elections are secure. Our rail systems are secure. America is doing just perfectly if you ask Joe Biden. Meanwhile, we're about to be classified as a third world by anyone with eyes, right? And that's it, right? You come to America now, you're not going to get the customer service. You come to America now and land in one of our airports, it's much shittier than the others. We're not going to build anything between our airports and our cities. There's no new infrastructure projects that are going to get done. It's just more fighting. It's just more arguing. It's going to be just more disharmony, more disillusionment, more of the psychological engine having no power, no capacity to move forward, no momentum, right? And momentum is everything in this. Momentum and movement and our ability to put one foot in front of the other and go forward is what's breaking down. And so last night, what's his name? Tucker Carlson started talking about this, right? Tucker Carlson now, and this is what we predicted yesterday, that the politicization of the economy is going to become more explicit because it wasn't before. We sort of kept politics a little bit. I mean, of course it was there. Bitcoiners have understood that the building block of this whole culture is the money, right? The building block is the fiat system. So we had already identified that. But in most people's eyes, you were able to treat each political issue as a one-off, right? Elections, border security, war on drugs, war abroad, all of these things, of course, have financial consequences and relationships, but it wasn't so squarely on political economic philosophy, right? It wasn't exactly there. It might have had it in its trappings, a small government, big government, but with the Uniparty, we never got there, right? We were never really having these conversations legitimately. So last night, Tucker Carlson actually came out and started talking in ways that I predicted yesterday, which is the politicization of economics and the economy in a very explicit way. And luckily, he did see things in in a frame that Bitcoiners would recognize. This is what he said. He says how artificially low interest rates and fractional reserve banking has actually caused the crisis. He made a similar point, and he made a point about fiat economy creating fiat elites and fiat culture. Right? This is some pretty good stuff. And he brought up quotes from Ludwig von Mises and from Murray Rothbard. He says, the endeavors to expand, this is from Mises, the endeavors to expand the quantity of money in circulation, either in order to increase the government's capacity to spend or in order to bring about a temporary lowering of the rate of interest, disintegrate all currency matters and derange economic calculation. So we are living in a derangement of economic calculation right now. And to have Tucker Carlson, whose show is bigger than all the other shows combined, right? It's bigger than all of them combined, said this out loud. Now, it doesn't mean we're looking to Tucker Carlson for answers here. It just means that the fight is on, that the communication and broadcasting edifice is going to continue to grind to this oppositional battlefront. At least they're over the target now. At least they're talking about the exact things that are important. Now, I don't think you're ever going to get a debate between the other networks and Tucker Carlson on this. I think you're just going to get people who continue to say, "Oh, Tucker Carlson, January 6th, right? Because whenever you have cognitive dissonance, the thing that ends up happening is here's another great tell for cognitive dissonance, right? One of the great tells is changing the subject, right? When you change the subject. So if Tucker Carlson does a show on fiat elites and fiat culture, you can just make up a few. They're easy to even imagine, right? You can hear someone say, "Oh, you thought about January 6th and you're in with Trump," and so you don't actually address the issue, and then you start, blabbing about nonsense and all these things, right? You'll start to hear word salad pour out of the person's mouth, as well as ad hominem attacks. So it's a combination of ad hominem insults and word salad that end up getting fused together, which is precisely the derangement that Mises is talking about here, right? The derangement is not just in poor customer service, our inability to coordinate to build a train line and public infrastructure and railroads and all the other stuff we need. It's also manifest in our ability to talk about things. And that was my prediction yesterday, that we wouldn't be able to talk about the economy in a clear way because everyone would be talking in their own bubble, and it would further disintegrate and derange the population. And I think that's where we're going to continue to be. The spin is going to keep going, right? You remember we'll save the laugh for later. We'll save the laugh for later. Okay. So here the engine, of course, is deranged, will not perpetuate, cannot move forward, will lead anyone who comes to this country to believe that we live in a third world country, just as was mentioned here. So the and this is where the contrast ends up being so important. Kanekoa Substack had a good breakdown of it, right? And he chose a few words that I want to share because I think they're super relevant to the way we talk about things. So he says, he gives the context. The banks purchased lots of treasuries and bonds when rates went to zero. Coincidentally, central banks around the world are now facing significant losses, which will fall onto the taxpayer. Both Goldman and Barclays say rate hikes are off the table for March. Here's the important part. When the entire economy is built on cheap money, the blocks are fragile, right? The blocks are fragile. And with every rate hike, you are pulling at them. Eventually, things will begin to shake. This is happening as more countries seek to trade in local currencies. What is going to happen next, right? And this is everything, right? Here's what we've been saying from the very beginning. Here's where myself, other Bitcoiners, other people who have seen the effects of state and money fused together, the war machine being one of the great products of that synthesis, of that combination. And when the war in Ukraine began, and all of this sanctioning of banks, sanctioning of the Russian system became the main target, everyone said, from our side of the aisle, is America really in this position anymore? Because America forcing everyone to continue to rely on the US dollar as the main reference for the economy, as the main settlement instrument, and the US petrodollar as the main energy source was now being gambled with in order to go to war in Ukraine. Because the sanctions to Russia had knock-on effects to India, other people who want energy, other people who had already been baked into this energetic system that now were being told, for our moral reasons, for American politics, you can't do this anymore. You're not allowed, right? Now, here's two headlines from 2022, about a year ago, January 28th, before the war. And this is Biden talking tough, right? Tough. This is, dark Brandon, I guess they call him, right? dark Brandon. Biden's sanctions plans targets Russian banks, companies, and imports if Ukraine is attacked, right? Now, contrast that with yesterday. Trading temporarily halted in dozens of banks after shares fell by up to 75% when markets opened at 9:30 a.m. Moments after, Biden said U.S. banking is safe as contagion spreads to heavyweights Wells Fargo. Now, remember, I've been saying for a long time that one of the great benefits of Biden as president for Bitcoiners is just looking at him, just physically, his appearance, his energy, the room he takes up, and the way he moves, the way he can't open his eyes properly, the way he can't even articulate simple words because they slur and they mumble, and he's got sundowner moments, and he falls downstairs, and right, him projecting anything is always good for us because he looks so dumb. And I continue to think it's one of um, the great kind of how would you call it? Like it's kind of it's almost like one of these mythological Hades traps. You know, even the idea of Paradise Lost, right? Have you guys ever read Paradise Lost, the John Milton famous poem from years ago? So in Paradise Lost, he portrays Satan as at once when he's just with his buddies, he's a big hero, right? Satan with his buddies, he's like, yeah, we're so powerful. We don't have to listen to them. We do our own thing. We're amazing, right? We're so tough. But anytime he actually comes into confrontation, he's a loser. He's such a coward. In the poem, one punch from the angel Gabriel, and he's done. Satan's wiped out, right? He really can't deal with anything. And when he finally makes his way to paradise, to Eden, and he's there, immediately he realizes, and he thinks that's what's going to make him happy, right? He thinks he gets to paradise and he's going to be happy, but immediately he understands something, that hell is actually inside of him, and that wherever he goes, he brings hell with him because it comes out of his own psychological state. He understands at that moment that it's inside of him and he can't escape it. That's his ultimate punishment. That the lowest of the low is inside of his belly, and he can't go away from it. And that's why he seeks to corrupt Adam and Eve, because he realizes there's nothing else. He'll never get to the point of happiness. And he realizes his best odds at something close to happiness is to force other people into their own psychological hell, to find them in the same pits of despair as he finds himself. Because when he's alone, he's miserable. Only when he's with his other lackeys does he talk boisterous. But when he is confronted by anyone, it doesn't work out. So you end up getting this phoniness, right? This weakness that comes out of who he is. And watching Biden, right? Watching Biden have to do a press conference and being forced to speak publicly is like watching someone having to carry around their own personal hell. He can't do the basic stuff. He can't do what he asked for, right? He asked for this and it's not possible, right? If you saw yesterday, even trying to open the door at the beginning, at the end, it's pathetic, right? It will be remembered in history as Bitcoiners rewrite the world and change systems and energize the world and bring energy back and bring infrastructure back and bring healthy living back, reorient our healthcare system and our medicines and all of those things. We're going to be laughing at these images of Biden for years. They're going to be historically funny because it's so obvious, A, that he can't even write. He's not the leader of the free world. This idea that the leader of the free world is him is hilarious. It's hilarious, right? It continues to be a punchline. And you can just think of this as one of these like mythical, hellish punishments that's being inflicted on him, because we'll only remember him as a failure and as an idiot and as a person whose brain has degraded to such a point that it was the tell for manipulation of the system behind the scenes. It was a tell for the whole Wizard of Oz aspect of this, right? You have to know there's more going on behind the curtain the minute you look at him, because he's so foolish, right? So listening to him as the cheerleader for banks, both at once being the tough guy against the banks around the world that wouldn't acknowledge American supremacy and American sanction capacity, and now having to backstop his own banks just a year later. So we're 1 year off from the talk tough stuff, right? So, so what you get here is clearly the derangement. And as I mentioned in the last thing, the building blocks, right? The blocks are fragile. When you've been at this for 80 years, the institutions are a joke. right? The healthcare part is beyond measure anymore. Fauci has no credibility amongst most people, or at least amongst most people who are aware. Right? I don't know the population of NPCs out there, so I'm discounting their overall numbers because elections don't matter anyway. It's force of persuasion. It's our ability to talk. It's our ability to coordinate. Of course, the big coordination, the big broadcast centers still have something going. But even just think about it, right? They had the Oscars 2 nights ago. I didn't even know they still made movies. I haven't seen one. I haven't seen a movie, and I was like, oh, Oscars, okay. What movie came out this year? I saw Top Gun on an airplane. I didn't know about any other movies made this year. Nothing. There's no such thing anymore. It's gone. There's no such thing as movies, right? They might make them, but nobody goes, and they don't have the same power to persuade as they once did, right? In the '90s, what did you do on the weekend? What movie is playing? Let's do the movie thing. It was a once a week thing, right? There was always a good movie playing somewhere, and that's what you did. I haven't thought that way in a long time. And it's not just because I have kids. There's literally nothing I would watch, rent, see, none of it. Nothing, right? So that power is already being those blocks have become fragile, right? The blocks of energy. Here's one for war, right? Did you see this? Taiwan has unveiled its first portable attack drone, a portable attack drone. Now, I've predicted for a while that drones are going to take over. They're going to become a major factor in the recalibration of the logic of violence and how violence works and how armies are deployed. I continue to believe that you're going to see a drone swarm take out important military infrastructure from that dates back from the World War II mindset. So an aircraft carrier, a tank battalion, something like that. We've seen the tanks get decimated, and not worse than decimated. Remember, decimated is just down by 1/10. The drones have wiped out tank warfare just because they can attack the top weak spot. They can do many things that tanks are unable to defend against. So Taiwan having a portable attack drone means, I talk a lot in my book. It's all about having an AI ball, right? So one day we're going to get there, and the fusion is going to be your own attack drone and a camera and the AI integrated inside of it. Now, in my world, we don't have the kind of violence, so it's not an attack drone anymore. But it could be, right? It can manifest things pretty quickly. So we're going to pass through that part of it, right, where everyone has the sort of camera slash gun that flies around with them and protects them, right, and protects them. So psychologically, we can see that these fragile blocks, right, are falling apart, and the military one is important because what's the cost of a portable drone going to be? $100, $500, like $1,000 maybe, right? It's not going to be much. It's going to be more powerful than a tank, and way less the cost. So that's just one part of it, right? Now you've also got simultaneous to all of this, you've got Xi, the Chinese leader or newly elected leader for his third term, longest serving Chinese leader in many years now, Xi, on his way to China. On his way to Russia, Moscow. And where is he going right after? Right? He's going to see Zelensky. He's going to pay a little visit to the Ukrainians. And the Wall Street Journal covered it today. So fresh out of the oven. Xi Jinping plans to speak with Zelensky for the first time since the start of the Ukraine war, likely after he visits Moscow next week to meet with Putin, according to people familiar with the matter. The meetings with Mr. Putin and Zelensky, the latter of which is expected to take place virtually, reflect Beijing's effort to play a more active role in mediating an end to the war in Ukraine, some people have said. The direct conversation comes after the diplomatic breakthrough they had, which we covered yesterday, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? So Saudi Arabia and Iran coming together because of China. Now, we are no fans of the CCP here. Please don't hear that, right? We are not fans of the CCP. We are not fans of Putin. We are not fans of Xi Jinping. We are not fans of Zelensky, right? We are against these powerful nation-state corporate structures, right? We want to see a liquidation of these corporate structures because they produce the same results. The Chinese population's mental health is not much better than the American people's mental health. The Russian people's mental health is worse than the American or Chinese mental health, right? These are super screwed up places with many, many, many broken brains littered all throughout their countries, right? So we are not using them for any form of hope, admiration, none of that. We're just talking about strategically what it means. It means that America with Biden can't fulfill any unifying role. There is no projection of peace. There is no projection of democracy. It's all just words. And indeed, just like Biden's punishment for what he asked for and what he got, watching this old dementia filled brain trying to walk into a room and give a speech where he says the banking system is safe, I assure you, right? It's laughable, right? It obviously does the opposite. Hearing him speak does the opposite of what he intends every time. Um, but to see that become explicitly played by foreign countries, remember, they don't want to have to wipe our asses. They don't want to have to fix our interest rate risk. They don't want to have to deal with any of this stuff. So, in the same way that he sits there and is punished by what he asked for, the fiat system itself becomes punished for what it asked for. It's just words. And words can't fix it. Words can't persuade to crank more energy into this. The building blocks are words. The building blocks of fiat are just words. And the words have lost their meaning. They've lost their persuasion power. They've lost their coordination power. And this whole cycle is not going to get fixed. It could get worse. Unfortunately, it can get worse. The damage probably isn't all done yet. There's probably a lot more that could be torn apart. Customer service in America could get even worse, right? At least you can still somehow on the internet buy an iPhone if the delivery works or whatever. There's some world where you can buy an iPhone still, I'm sure. I managed to do it last year. It took me the whole day to finally get my hands on one, but it's possible, right? I had to do a lot of it myself, unfortunately, with the guide. But here you've got G, who can actually become a global statesman in all of this. And with America's inability to project its power and to have this sort of reputation now as a warmongering, corrupted carcass, you get Caitlin Oz, who we talk about a lot with her Australia coverage, writing the following. And I think it sort of is the same script for the whole world, right? The whole so-called Western world is going to have to come to grips with what she mentions here about Australia. So this is what she says. She says, Australia is caught between a rock and a pentagon, and both are the fault of the United States. The US is responsible for engineering all the hostilities between China and the Western Power Alliance in its desperate attempts to secure unipolar hegemony. And the US is responsible for creating the fear other countries feel, knowing what fate might befall them if they disobey its dictates. The US is solely responsible for creating a situation in which we are being forced to choose between A, throwing our sons and daughters into the gears of an unimaginably terrible war while destroying our economy and risking nuclear Armageddon, or B, facing retribution and retaliation from a government that is far more violent and destructive than China. This completely intolerable situation is why Australians are being aggressively hammered with war propaganda about China right now. We've covered that on the show, right? We've covered all these aspects, right? If we were simply allowed to consume truthful information and think normal thoughts, no healthy person would ever consent to any of this. And that's what it all comes down to. Healthy people, right? Healthy people. There is no healthy people getting created out of this thing. This is about people bringing their own personal hell with them, projecting their personal hell onto others, and hoping those people get caught in their same personal hell. But the story of Paradise Lost has its mirror, right? That indeed all is of the mind, right? Milton says that entirely, right? And if you believe in simulation theory, Milton might have already got it pegged back then, that each individual person is a microcosm of the universe. Each individual person can make heaven inside of themselves, right? You can do that. It's just your thoughts, right? It's your thoughts And exactly what Caitlin Oz says here, if we were simply allowed to consume truthful information and think normal thoughts, right? If you think normal thoughts, you're going to be healthy, right? And so the system that we are talking about all the time with Bitcoin perpetuates a world where you can have normal thoughts, where they're not being influenced by psyops, they're not being influenced by someone else's motivations, they're not being influenced by other people who now carry their personal hell with them everywhere they go, which is why we get bad customer service, why we can't build anything, why the whole system seems so corrupted. But it's a follow the money situation, right? It's a follow the money situation because if you follow the money, and this is what's so great about why the politicization heading into the economy, heading into banks is so important. It doesn't mean we're going to solve anything and argue correctly and come to a resolution. It just means that the words we're speaking are now in a limited capacity, but over the target, right? We don't have to talk about Mueller and Russia collusion and everything Trump said, because that becomes a distraction, right? After one term of Trump, I said immediately, he's expensive in the sense that you get sidetracked with his stuff. I spent 4 years of Trump time being, well, this is what he meant, right? This is what he meant. No, 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 no. He didn't mean that, right? He meant something. You missed the story, right? Now that's fine. I don't mind doing it. But he'll go off. I mean, he did it yesterday with DeSantis. He goes off and rants about this DeSantis guy, and you gotta, I don't know, defend him, I guess. But I don't have the patience to do that, and it's not over the target as much. Now he gets the target right a lot, Trump does, and no one can deny his rhetorical power. If we're talking about the lack of persuasion, we're never talking about Trump, right? He's very persuasive, the opposite of Biden in every way. Still very persuasive. That hasn't gone away. But he doesn't really promote normal thoughts, right? He promotes a type of mania that is sometimes helpful. It was certainly helpful to dislodge America from its fake trap and to alter reality from 2016 on. But I continue to believe Biden is just as good at it now, in the sense that he's so off-putting and so silly looking that you can't possibly be attracted to it. So it's the same result, just two different approaches. So in the end, look, the world will force America to realize that what it's perpetuated here is its own problem, that the money that it's projected around the world has caused strife beyond the borders of America. And so in the end, these countries are not going to participate in our game anymore. And these other guys are going to get on with their lives and maybe think normal thoughts or maybe not. But as Americans, it's our job to rip apart the pieces that have brought the world into this place and to start perpetuating systems that will lead to healthy living and healthy thoughts. Luckily, Bitcoin is the simple plan, the simple trajectory. It's not rocket science. It's just don't bother with the words. Don't listen to the words that go into fiat. Save your money, build things, do some work, put one foot in front of the other, get on with your day, right? Let's see some of these quotes here. Let's see what's going on. Let's see. I missed a lot of stuff here. Whoa. Yeah. Let's see. I'm missing a bunch. Let me go back to the top. I got the highs. Differently if they didn't change. People act like the sun would run. Yeah, sorry guys. I think I saw Dex or someone asking Enmity. I think so. USA had a time change. Where I live, there are no time changes, but I didn't want to change the time that people are used to watching it at, so I did a time change. But yeah, the change the clock thing got to go. It's just got to go. Yeah. I think this is when I was talking about all the people working in the customer service. So yeah, it is insane. The poor customer service is something else. I'm still searching for work. I got an interview over the KFC near me, and if I get a job, I can just Kung Fry. But at least I will be mining fiat currency for Bitcoin. Yeah, that works. That works. Waitering will be better if they receive part of their sales. Otherwise, there's no incentive in the hourly wage. Yeah, if there's tips, but it looks like they're going to be trying to tax those, which is crazy. Just did 35K on Saturday. Love being a cook. Yeah, I loved working in the restaurants, and even with AI, it's something that I was just telling people yesterday as a prediction. I don't know if it's true, but there was a pleasure that I used to feel at the end of a shift in the service industry that is hard to replicate in any other job. And I do think humans get a lot of pleasure out of just work, right? And so now you see all this AI coming in. It's going to wipe out the fancy artist jobs, all these guys with their horn rimmed glasses. That's what it's going to kill first, right? Copywriting and all this shit. So you can imagine that the human and then the robots aren't going to be ready in time, and they're not ready now. So it's like the manual labor, the service industry stuff and all that, farming and construction and manufacturing. It looks like those are going to be the jobs of the future. But it's nothing wrong with that, because humans working together, I mean, even just hanging out with staff after a shift is one of the most pleasurable, satisfying feelings in the world. You close a restaurant down, and you all no, I don't. The alcohol involved. There's always a drink at the end of the night, so I don't like that. But just that feeling is really what human happiness is built off of, right? It's not built off of I got a fancy job at a bank, right? It's not that. It doesn't get you. That doesn't feel good at all. Yeah, so notice it in stores. Yeah, it's there. Whim store tellers. Most places nowadays are moving. Not in New York. They had to close all the self checkout stuff because of thieving. So all the self checkout stuff is gone. It was first in New York, didn't make it. It came in. I remember they opened an Amazon Whole Foods with no human staff around the corner from my office in New York in 2018, maybe. It's gone. They just got robbed blind every day. No one paid, so it's finished. Yeah. Yeah, the free money killed customer service. I think so. Yeah, I think the masks had a role. Honestly, people's patience ran out with the masks. And it got so bad. I remember even pulling my mask down for a lady once to show her that I was smiling, and she treated me like I was like I pulled a gun out. Right, and I was like, I'm not going to do that again. I just wanted to let her know that I was happy with, but she wasn't happy about it. She wasn't happy about it. Yeah, Nostr is great, but I cannot find an Android. Yeah, I don't. Damus is good. Yeah, they got to get. It'll get better. Yeah, Amethyst. Yeah. So you said, yeah, it's not that I'm starting the show. It's the stupid times. Clock change. Secret to prices on Apple Stocks app. No. Pump stream. Yeah, is it pumping? What are we doing here? Oh yeah, pump. Look at that. We love it. P-Man Van. I'm in the Yucatan. They are building a huge high-speed train to all parts. Complete op. Yeah, I mean, look, I you ever been to the airport in Singapore? I mean, God, it's one of the most beautiful. I would go there just to hang out. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like, the body of humanity is sending the fiat overhead a death signal to go into the senescence. For the centralized power has become an evolutionary rudiment. The old power doesn't want to capitulate. Yeah, well, they're going to have no choice, right? Yeah, we got 35 people, 36 right now. We're holding strong. Amazing, guys. Thanks for coming, everyone. I appreciate it. It's nice when there's a big audience, I think. It could bring peace, indeed. Maybe this is the way maybe this is what they fail to see. It's a whole new way of organizing the world. It's a non-political. It's non-technological. Humanity is undergoing a hyperconnectivity upgrade. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. If it ends the death and destruction, I'm all for it. Yeah. Yeah. Look at this. We got price checks here. Yeah, we love it. We love it. Yeah. We love it. I'm going to put this one, pumping Bitcoin. Yeah, we love it. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one up after 26K. Jeez. I have to remind myself price doesn't matter. Nah, I mean, it does, in a sense. In a sense. It's a scorekeeping thing. The price doesn't matter. The price won't matter in the future, in the sense that the scorekeeping won't be the U.S. dollar exchange rate. Right. I continue to believe it'll be one of the most important metrics is just going to be how much Bitcoin is concentrated in this or that. So the future of banking, for example, and I made this argument early at Kraken, was that, and I said we got to focus on this. It's the proof of reserves tool and the projection of what's in reserve. So broadcasting what's in reserve in the old way of free banking, that's exactly what showed confidence and the reason why you would trust a bank. They had money. So I continue to think that price doesn't matter, but how much Bitcoin you have will be the most important thing. Individually, you don't need to go broadcasting it, but there you go. It does. It really doesn't. But it's nice to see. Yeah, it's a score. It's scorekeeping. It's just scorekeeping. It's just scorekeeping. Yeah, I do post on Noster, guys. I haven't really been. Anyway, I'll share my pub key again today. Give it some retweets because it's not really getting much circulation. I'm just trying to get around it, or just trying to get comfortable with Noster. But there you go. Going for a swim in the ocean, P-Man Van. You enjoy it, my man. You enjoy it. You enjoy it. I'll keep this one up when I sign off. All right, team. Thanks for coming. Give it a like. Give it a subscribe. We love it. Right? All right, everyone. See you tomorrow, team.